And welcome back to In the Can. With us is co-director of Magic Trip, Allison Elwood. Thanks. And you worked with Alex Gibney on this, and of course, Alex has been to Sundance a million trillion times. Is this your first time? You've been to Sundance.
I've been to Sundance before
Yeah.
as a producer and editor. This is my first directing experience here.
So how did that go for you? I mean,
it's great.
It's always fun to move from producer to director. I find like the writers and actors who move to director, it's a different kind of process. But producers are directing anyway. Let's be honest. And so it's just a question of getting behind the camera.
Yeah.
Now, Magic Trip is an interesting documentary because it's not one of those typical documentaries where you turn the camera on and see the story unfold. The story happened years and years and years ago. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, when Alex and I were here with Enron in 2005, we read an article by Robert Stone about, and he was mentioning this trip again, and we started talking to the estate, and it turns out that there was 50 hours of footage boxed away in Kesey's, attic at that point. So we negotiated a deal with them and to get the film restored at UCLA, and Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation helped us with that. And it was a long process to get the material restored. We would get probably 10 hours every 6 months or something. So it's been in the works for years, but it was just a treasure trove when we really got to look at it, and it's been beautifully restored. And
for those who don't know kind of the background, it's kind of the story of Ken Kesey, who was a screenwriter for Cuckoo's Nest.
Was not the screenwriter, he wrote the novel.
Wrote the novel, that's right. He wrote the book. And it's kind of one of those epic 60s coast-to-coast road trips. And in fact, it kind of brought back, visions of Jack Kerouac, and Neil Cassidy was actually part of this.
He was driving the bus.
Who was Jack's buddy on
Dean
on
Moriarty,
the road. Right, yeah. So it's kind of remarkable that you were able to find these files, but at the same time, we're talking decades ago. How were they in good shape? I mean, how much work did you have to do to restore them?
Some of it was in good shape, but a lot of it, they'd cut the original material because they had shown the films over and over and over at various parties, and they had made some films out of the material too. So some of it was in good shape. Other bits of it were spliced to death, and the perfs were all broken. So it was a big restoration job. But when we finally got to see it, beautifully restored and the color rich, it's just stunning. I mean, to me, the footage just jumps, it pulls me into the screen. And I feel like I'm on the bus, I can smell the fumes, I can feel the bumpy road, and it's just, we feel and hope that other people feel that it's an experiential film.
Now, when you say fumes, you're talking gasoline, right?
Bus fumes, yes.
No, but it's kind of a unique idea. I mean, apparently they rigged, they went in advance knowing that they wanted to document this trip.
That's
and so
correct.
They rigged the van with microphones, with cameras, and that kind of thing, too.
Yep.
Do you think their storytelling was good? I mean, were you impressed by the way they kind of set up what may have been the very first reality show ever, in a lot of ways?
I don't think that it was their job to make the film. It was their job to document what they were doing. They were living it.
It was kind of a video journal for them.
It was a journal, and Ken didn't really want to. It was a new form of writing for him. He says early in the film that if Shakespeare were writing today, he wouldn't be using a quill pen. And this was it was an experiment for him. It was about living something rather than reading something.
So were you surprised at where it went? I mean, did you know about this happening, or did you know about the story at all before you saw the footage?
I knew about the story, but not nearly in the detail that we came to learn about once we saw all the material and all the stops that they made along the way and all the trouble that they had.
Yeah, and that trouble obviously would probably be more interesting than the normal trouble that the rest of us ever get.
Yeah, well, when the bus breaks down, all sorts of things can go on.
Now they were heading to the New York World's Fair, right? What was the point to that? Why was that destination important?
It was, in Ken's mind and a lot of people's minds at that point, it was the world of the future. It was Tomorrowland. It was billed as such. And what they found when they got there is that it was actually yesterday.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with the future. It was all about the past, and that they were the future, and that they were moving forward and taking something beyond the edges, which is always what Ken talks about, being an explorer.
And Ken also talks, he's a very experiential guy. He's the smell the roses type of guy too. So it wasn't just the idea of getting there, but just everything that happened. And in fact, I know you brought a clip of some very interesting things that did happen on the way. Set this up for us.
The clip is one of the first of many times that they were pulled over by the police.
Go figure, right?
Yeah, and they were, it was the first time a psychedelic bus had been seen, so no one knew what it was. And they would jump out and say they were making a movie, and so the police all thought that they were just, like college pranksters or something, which, of course, they were called the pranksters.
Right.
But of course, they were concealing lots of drugs, which at the time were not illegal. But nonetheless, they didn't want to appear that they were driving a bus around the country, on LSD. So
which they were.
Which they were.
Yeah.
So,
So we're not hiding anything. But let's take a look at the clip.
Okay,
This is Magic Trip. There is so much of life I haven't lived. I look at that too. And was that Andy Griffith's car or not?
Certainly
that
looks
was
like it.
seriously that cop car. That was.
Yeah.
It does bring up the fact, though, I'm listening to voiceover, which is obviously something that you included, very good quality sound. And then we're hearing the sound, of the cameras of the time.
Right.
How much of that sound worked for you? You were mentioning before we came on that there was a lot of work to do. You actually hired a lip reader at some point to make sure that you were true to the script, so to speak.
Well, we were trying to find moments of sync in all the hundreds of hours of audio tape that we also were restoring in addition to the film. And we did hire a lip reader at one point to help us go through and try to find moments, and they gave up pretty quickly.
Was it just because the subjects were a little slurry?
I'm not sure that they ever. Occasionally they would run the sound and the cameras at the same time, but I don't think they didn't really understand technically what they were doing. We did find 4 moments.
Yeah, but they didn't go into it from a technical aspect.
Not at all.
They weren't making a film, like you said.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they wanted to make a film, and they did make films out of it. But I don't think, they didn't hire professional camera people to go along with them. I mean, Ken didn't like experts. He distrusted them, so.
Well, it showed up in his writing, didn't it? I mean, he has such a love for organization and for administration and for nurses.
Exactly.
Things like that, too. So let me ask you this. I mean, it starts in California.
Yes.
It goes to New York, so it's very much a road trip, so to speak. But it's also a road trip from a relationship standpoint. I mean, you can't travel across the country with people without learning something or realizing something or becoming a little different or seeing a bigger view of the world. Tell us about that story. I mean, so many times you'll see that sub-story within the physical story of a travel narrative.
Obviously to the pranksters who went on the trip, it was something entirely different than people watching it because they were experiencing it in a different way. And for them, it was a lot about love relationships and mixing and matching, and it was the era of free love and the complications that presented to them, and we go through that with them a little bit in there. For me, the most amazing moment is there's a bit where they go through Yellowstone Park on the way back, which is a much more mellow part of the trip. And they go through Yellowstone, and Ken sees a sign, "Beware of the bear." And to me, the most profound moment that he says is that, that sign used to mean, "Be aware of the bear." But now it means be afraid of the bear. And so much of what he was about was trying to get rid of this sort of Cold War fear of the bomb and and what Goldwater and all those people represented, and about life and love and light. And to me, that moment is just so beautiful, and it expresses to me what he was all about. Now, he may have other thoughts on that, but that's my take from it.
No, it makes perfect sense because that time of our country's history too was also a sign of huge, profound societal change, of tolerance, of we look back in the 60s and say, how could we possibly have thought that way in many respects, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that beware or be aware message really does speak further than just a bear in the woods. So,
yes, exactly.
Well, I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you so much.
Now you do have a couple of screenings. I know we're late in the festival, but people do have a chance to see this film.
Absolutely, yeah. We have a screening today at 3 o'clock at Temple and tomorrow 3 o'clock at the Egyptian.
Okay, so you still have a chance to see Magic Trip. Go with your eyes wide open. You're going to love this film. Allison Elwood, thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more in the can after this.